Okay, so how did I get where I am today? Long story. In the beginning, my parents said they gave me a train set when I was 2. I don't remember it. What, 2? Yeah. I remember it about 5. And if you look closely, Chicago Northwestern. I was a Chicago Northwestern fan before I knew what it was. We lived in a town called Berkeley, Illinois, western suburb of Chicago. And it was on the southwestern edge of Proviso Yard. Proviso Yard was the big yard of Chicago Northwestern. Up until the 50s, it was the largest yard in the country. Back in the 20s, when everything was 40-footers, they could hold 29,000 cars. So it was a big L-shaped yard, and we were down at the southwest corner. And all the freights, they all diverted into the yard. So if you went back, a couple blocks away and watched the trains, you didn't see many freight trains, but you saw these guys all the time. The commuter trains, they had a cab. They had a cab car on the back end, so they were never turned. They just went back and forth again and again. The other railroad in our town, Chicago Great Western, they were the last Granger Road out of Chicago. They got the really lousy routes, the longest, the hilliest. So they basically created these land barges of trains. So they cruised through town with between 100 and 120 cars all the time. Their standard motive power was 9,000 horsepower. When it was F's, it was, 6 or 7 or more. Then they bought GP30s, needed 4 of those to get 9,000. And then SD40s, you needed only 3. This is Taft Avenue, Main Street in Berkeley. If you go to the right about a mile, you get to my house. If you go behind the photographer about a half mile, you're at the school that I went to, St. Matilda's, and where if I was in a classroom that year that faced the tracks, I was always getting yelled at for counting the cars. So that was the prototype inspiration that I saw. January 1962, cover photo for the model railroader. This is my uncle's layout. That is not my uncle. That's one of the guys in this club. This is all scratch-built stuff that he did in 1962. This is his layout. It was a fictitious bridge line, but when you read the planning and how to do a layout, they talk about having a purpose, having a theme. They had it all. They had staging yards before they were called staging yards. So this is what I operated on as a kid. They had a dual control panel. You switch the blocks to keep your train under control. They had a really neat way of controlling the turnouts. So they would have the map there, and there would be like little rivet heads on the map, and you had a test probe, and when you wanted to throw that turnout, you just touched it. There were no switches. It was really slick. So, when I was a kid, we would go there for holidays, and it was like, are we done with dinner yet? Are we done with dinner? I want to go run the trains, So I look back at this and I thought, this is what everybody did, right? My uncle was a mechanical engineer and an artist. Basically, he cut his own strip wood, his own ties, all the tracks hand laid. The structures are all scratch built. This is my uncle here. That's my cousin. There's a guy named Al Snyder who was his best friend. The rest of the people I never met. But this is what I got to play with. And I look back on that and I'm thinking this was probably state of the art for 1962 model railroading.
Is this HO scale?
Pardon
me? HO or O?
It's HO. This is all HO. And, just incredible layout. A couple years, I don't know how many years after that, my uncle and Al Snyder went out to Cheyenne, Wyoming, took photos. My uncle drew up about 8 pages of drawings that were in model railroader, created this structure. I think he won the regional and I think he won the national. I think it might have been in Milwaukee that year. We were in Chicago area, not too far. You may recognize it because Campbell, remember the Campbell kits? They picked this up. It was called Quick's Coal. They took the drawings and they ran with it. My uncle was a builder. He wasn't into operating. this layout, this is 62, so I was 8. They moved when I was like 5. So this layout was built in 3 years. Just incredible. So anyway, this is what I grew up on, you know. So typical story. I didn't start model railroading till after I got a high school, college, got married, started work. I was working in the Chicago area for Motorola for 4 years. I operated, I mean, we didn't have formal sessions, but went to his house and ran it for 4 years. Then I moved to New Hampshire. I joined the Chicago Northwestern Historical Society, which was, you know, the smartest move I ever did. I was a member of the Bedford Boomers since '84, so I built a couple modules, and I didn't have a home layout until now, 2015. Couple false starts. I had a great house up until 2002. I had a basement with a 62-foot run. And then I got divorced. That all went. She got the house. I got the payments, you know. So lots of ideas. Chicago Northwestern, somewhere. I originally was thinking of Upper Michigan. Why? Around 1980, Athearn came out with the Fairbanks Morse Trainmaster, and they had one painted in Chicago Northwestern colors. Chicago Northwestern had the baby Trainmasters, which were like 3 feet shorter, but you could barely tell the difference. So that was the notion there. Then with boomer modules, you know, I modeled a Chicago Northwestern set of modules in the middle of New England modules. So that something happened in 1979. Trains came out with this article about the TOFC and auto rack trains that ran across the state of Illinois and all the way out to Fremont. I think it's Nebraska. And I'm like, well, I got to have these, but double track Maine? Am I serious? That's a calendar. I mean, there it is. That's what I was thinking of. Got to have that one. Then in the late 90s, what was it, 1996, Walthers came out with their steel mill series. So I picked it up. Mike, I know you're in the same boat. All of a sudden, I got to do steel. And I start researching, and oh, okay. Dean Freitag's book, I don't know how many of you have it. If you read it, it's great on modeling steel. So what's my want list? At this point, Chicago Northwestern, still not a big concept on it, plus some Chicago Great Western if I can get it in there. I want to have the commuter trains, I want the Falcons, and I need a steel mill. Then this article came out, 2000, story of West Chicago. This is not Western City of Chicago. This is a separate town 30 miles out from the Chicago Northwestern downtown station. This is the track plan. This is out of the Chicago Northwestern documentation. So this is a unique yard. So we have the main lines at the bottom. And if you look, this yard is only 7 tracks deep at one end, and then it gets a little wider at the freight end. But they had a coach yard. The Western Commuter District went from Chicago, just past West Chicago to Geneva, but all the commuter trains were stored in this yard. If you look, there's this J lead. So there was an interchange with the E, J, and E Railroad, which, oh, by the way, is owned by US Steel and went down to Gary, Indiana. So all of a sudden we have a reason we can get to the steel mills. So I was thinking for a long time, this would be a really neat yard to model, because nobody models a prototypical yard because they're just so big. You know, here's an opportunity maybe to get a lot of the real things that were in this yard. So then I ran into operations. Bruce Robinson, 2008. I started it. I got hooked on it. I went to several conventions. Every time I went, I'm there with my tape measure. Which height do I like? Which, you know, everything. I started operating on John Newick's, Matt's, Dick Fralick's, Mike Graham's. Still doing that. Operations are a must. I got to have operations. So finally, retired after 35 years. Lynn and I bought a house in 2015. I negotiated rights to the basement. She said I could have it. She didn't know what she was in for. So I finished several walls and I started planning a very, very, very ambitious layout. And we bought the house in 15, we moved in 16. We basically had 2 4-bedroom colonials full of stuff that we then merged. So stuff is a problem, where to store stuff.
Container.
So we got rid of a lot, but, so now I have my must-have list. Prototype layout based on Chicago Northwestern double trap main line. We have a branch out of Nelson, wrong button. Nelson, Illinois is on the main line, goes south to Madison, Illinois, which is basically East St. Louis. Then I have the EJ&E line. I want a design for operations. I want a dispatcher. I want a round-the-room bookshelf style. Bill Darnaby is one of the authors that is in a lot of model railroading magazines. Him and Tony Custer were buddies. All 3 of those 2 and me went to Purdue, but we're all out of sync. They were in the train club, and I really wasn't into it then, but there was a big train club at Purdue. Want long runs between towns, narrow shelves to minimize scenery, multi-level. At first I was thinking 3 levels, but fortunately I got that out of my head. Steel industry, push-bill commuter trains, and I wanted to do this in CAD. I mean, this is huge. I got to have a way of documenting it. The would like to haves, fully signaled, detection of trains, computer-based dispatcher panel, some Chicago Great Western motive power. The way that happened is Chicago Great Western got bought by Chicago Northwestern in 1968. That photo that I showed you, those tracks were pulled up in about a minute. And now Chicago Northwestern had red Chicago Great Western locomotives running around. And I've chosen 1975, so it was 7 years later, yeah, they're still around. 3 levels, as I said, reduced to 2. Derive requirements. We need to have storage under the layout. That's number 1. I have a number of places that I have to have lift out sections because the train is blocking all kinds of things. The laundry, we have a second stove and a refrigerator downstairs. There's an electrical box, the slider, and then I have a walkout back door for the train entrance. The steel mills needed a connection. That's where the EJ&E came in. EJ&E is the outer belt line around Chicago. Went from Waukegan in the north, and I'll show you a map. And then layout is set in 1975. And that's because of the type of motive power and things that were happening that I wanted. So this is my basic, simple map of what the layout's going to be. So Chicago Station goes by Proviso Yard at Berkeley, the various towns with stations, and then at West Chicago, there's the interchange with EJ&E and the crossing, single track over 3-track. Geneva, Rochelle, we know Rochelle, that's in all the trains, camera is out in Rochelle. Nelson, I mentioned Nelson. So Nelson is where the southern line goes. Now the southern, all of this is all multi-track. It's triple track from Chicago out to West Chicago, then it's double track all the way to Clinton over in Iowa. But it's about 130 miles. But this is basically single track. If you look at the timetables in the track charts, it was DTC, direct traffic control, which is some type of train order. It's a train order system. So, that's a different opportunity. This line basically was built because in this town of Benold, I don't know how to say that. It's either Ben or Beld or whatever. I say it wrong. That's where Chicago Northwestern had 3 coal mines to supply the coal for their steam engines in the steam engine day. They're long gone. Union Pacific owns it now, and Union Pacific gets to pay for the fact that a junior high sunk because the coal mine subsided. They got to pick that one up. Monterey mine. This mine was still going. It was a modern, it wasn't around in the earlier days, but it operated till 2017. So now I have a coal mine on my road. So that gives me a lot of options. Madison Yard is the southern terminus. It's in, the East St. Louis area. And I didn't know it in the beginning, but right next to it is Granite City Steel Mill, a a US steel mill, integrated mill, right next door. So that opened up some things. And then the EJ&E, as I said, Waukegan is on Lake Michigan up north, I don't know, about 40, 50 miles north of Chicago. All this Gary stuff is on Lake Michigan south of Chicago, and then Chicago is on Lake Michigan. So this is around, the EJ&E was the outer belt line. It had, I don't know, about 5 or 6 power plants online. So there's a lot of options there for things. So I'm going to show you the extract cab design, but after I did this in ExtraCAD, you can go in and you can put 2 points in and you can get the distances and you can see all the grades. And to give you an idea, the main line is going to be 176 feet long. The southern district is 178 feet long, and the EJ&E is 74. So I have long distances, trying to keep the stations, 20 feet apart at least, trying to stretch it out. This is another drawing, and both of these drawings were done for my chief dispatcher AP award. But I mean, these are things you need to describe your railroad. So it turned out to be, kind of a blessing to do this. This is a diagram of what the trackage was. It hasn't been updated in 5 years, but basically, this is downtown Chicago. We have a station. It goes by in Berkeley where the Proviso Yard connects. Proviso Yard and Clinton Yard are two ends of one big staging yard. So theoretically, you could run continuously around. So we go out, we have Berkeley, we have Elmhurst, we have Wheaton, we have West Chicago, and then we have Geneva. We have Rochelle. This is where Nelson is, and it connects eventually to Clinton. The Nelson line, this goes down to the helix, so that all of this is the lower level. So this is somewhat defined, but I have room for changing some things. I have an interchange with the Chicago and Illinois Western, or Chicago and Western Illinois. This is the coal mine. They have an actual balloon track. They had, the trains just rolled right through there and loaded at 2 miles an hour, whatever. And then down in Madison Yard, I have an interchange with the Alton and Southern, and I actually don't see it now, but I have some steel mill there. EJ&E, whoops. The EJ&E, there was a guy, I think his name was John Egan, who came out with a 3-book set on the Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern. I didn't know much of anything about Waukegan. I knew there was a power plant there, but it turns out there was a whole lot more. They actually have a small port. So we have the ComEd Plant 16. We have an interchange, and this was interesting, with the Chicago Northwestern, because the north line of Chicago Northwestern went right by there. And in the winter, when the Great Lakes were frozen, they would haul iron ore on the Chicago Northwestern to the EJ&E, which then hauled it down to the steel mills. So we have some interesting operations there. There's a number of industries up there. This is the interchange yard, which is actually part of West Chicago. And then we're going to have some power plants. We're going to have a chemical plant. This is Kirk. What is the name of it? Yeah, Kirkyard? That doesn't sound right. And then steel mill. And this stuff is loosely defined. So that's pretty much what I'm going to build. And then, this is that same drawing that I had of the West Chicago yard. So information sources, we all know about magazines and books. Timetables I found all kinds of information on timetables, about the commuters. I have separate, I'll pull this stuff out and we can look at it at lunchtime. Rule books, track charts. Oh, there's some timetables. There's a rule book that I have. This is a sample of a track chart. The Chicago Northwestern Historical Society has a link to, I think it's the last set of track charts before the Union Pacific bought them. I have track charts for the entire railroad, and I don't know if these are available in the Boston and Maine. Do they have track charts available? Anyway, you want to go find out about your railroad. This one page has incredible amount of data on it. So you have the tracks here. You have any kinds of crossovers, sidings, signals, stations, all of that. You want to know about what the rail is, when it was installed, when it was milled. They have codes for a lot, but all the rail is defined there. This happens to be in front of Proviso Yard, which is what this line is. And there's the Berkeley station. The Berkeley station is nothing more than it's like a bus stop with a shelter over it. There was nothing there. You can see the grade of the entire line. This shows curvature. And then these lines are various street crossings. And I think they have more information. And then you'll see things like this. I think every pipe or culvert bigger than 6 inches in diameter is mapped. They have everything.
You have that from 1914 in Boston and Maine. To the museum, so we can actually put where the culverts and the pipes are if we want to.
Right, it's all in there. And then this is like the 293 and I-94 crossing. So this is just one page, and it shows 5 miles of it, but a lot of information. And when it came to thinking about doing signaling, I got a lot of information on this. Same thing with interlockings. All right, so I'm going to bring up Extract CAD and show you what this thing looks like. So I'm going to need to share screens here, if I may. So when I started this out, this area right here was the TV room, and the ceiling is done. This whole area was carpeted. This was all unfinished. I had to do a lot of work. And then we have this room that we used to call the mud room, but is now the helix room. So this is the basic, this is the first thing I had to do was draw the room. Something I should have done, which I didn't do till later after I wasted time. So what I should have plotted early on that I didn't plot till later was all the low hanging ceiling obstructions, like sewer pipes, any other pipes that were in the way. Those should have got drawn in, but naturally I didn't do that right away. So this is the layout. This is the high level, and I got to zoom in so we can actually see things. All right, there we go. So I talked about West Chicago Yard and trying to model it prototypically. And I had this 30-foot peninsula thinking, oh, this is great. I can fit it exactly like it is. Wrong, not big enough. So I had to make some changes. I had to make some compromises, but basically I have the main line going by, and I have the coach yard in here. I have industries in the back. Later on, they added auto rack unloading, and then the freight yard is down here. And then the connection with the EJ&E comes up here, just to give you an idea.
How long is that peninsula?
I'm sorry, what?
How long is the peninsula?
30 feet.
30 feet.
30 feet long, yeah. So this is the upper level, and the way you move this is you grab this little window here. So Chicago Northwestern Chicago Station is up here. It's about 4 inches higher than the staging yard. Comes around. I have a wood stove here. This is a built-in shelf. I'm going to blow right through that. This is where Proviso Yard connects through Elmhurst, Wheaton. And this is like some of the things that I've said. I have the laundry here, so I have to make lightweight, removable sections. We go by Wheaton with Chicago. Blow through the wall here. So anyway, West Chicago, this is where the EJ&E crosses. This is the entrance to the yard, downtown lead. So down at the end of the peninsula. Well, that's a section of track, and that tells you that you can't read it, but the radius is 36. So it's 36 and then 33 and a half. I had to go smaller in some places. So we go by the yard. This was going to be the Fox River, but it may become a pond here. This track is in, and I put it on plywood, thinking I'll cut it out and put a bridge in. But it's curved, it's on a grade, and it's banked. And if I try to take it out and put it back in, it'll be a disaster problem. So it's probably not going to happen. So we go by Geneva, which is the end of the line for the commuter trains. Then I had to go. In order to get this radius right here, like 30 or so, I had to go under the yard. And then, so this is all downgrade and then back upgrade. And then this, like I said, this is the EJ&E interchange and the main line. I tried to make it such that when you look at the railroad, you only see one location. And this is one of the few places where you see two things, and I just couldn't get around that. So the main line, as it heads west, it goes out of sight, comes back out through Rochelle. This is the crossing with the Burlington Northern, and then it heads up toward Nelson. So this is where Nelson is, and also where the EJ&E heads into the helix room right here, and Nelson heads into the helix room right there, and the rest of the main line continues over to Clinton where the staging is. So this location here is one of the fictitious things where I move some things geographically in order to have the in Belvedere, Illinois, which is up near Rockford, they have a large automotive plant, and I wanted to model that, so I kind of moved it. And I needed a potato chip factory because I have a bunch of BAR refrigerator cars, and I needed a destination, so we have a potato chip factory. And Blue Star Potato Chips was actually in Rockford. And then again, I blew through the wall. Somebody's gonna be patching a whole lot of walls, and later on in years. So you see this green line, that's kind of like a cliff retaining wall. So the Nelson line is going downgrade, and this is the beginnings of the West Chicago yard. This is where there's a port. They have the slip that's big enough for basically one ship. They either bring in cement barges and they pneumatically blow them into two different silos, two different company silos. And then on this side, kind of neat, they bring in a self-unloading ship with crushed limestone for National Gypsum's sheetrock factory. So that's going to be something. And then you can see where the helix is, and I built on top of the helix, which is why I had to go downgrade to get low enough to get into the helix. And then this is the interchange where those outwork trains come in that I talked about. I have the receiving yard and departure yard, and then I have 3 classification tracks, and then I have the ComEd power plant, and then Johns Manville had a big, huge plant that they made asbestos tile and asbestos this and asbestos that, and by 85 it was gone. So it's like all the other asbestos companies. So if we switch levels now. This is the outlet of the helix. And basically, we're now on the lower level. I'm gonna have a large grain elevator. Large grain elevator. And you can see this is gonna be pretty simple track. I'll get this out of the way. Here's an interchange with the Chicago and Western, or Chicago, Illinois Midland, which was a coal line owned by Commonwealth Edison. I've always wanted to do a scene where you look down the street and you see the tracks, you've got with the houses on both sides, so that's gonna go there. And then out on this peninsula. So when I was building this, and I'll show you some of the construction detail in a second, this is a 18-inch overhang around the, I call it the blob at the end. And so the support design was complicated. Get this. So the southern line, there's a passing siding here, and then there's the coal mine. This is where the loader will be, and then it'll loop back. And then we have some of the areas that are less well defined. And so this is where the Madison, Illinois yard is, and again, I have to blow through walls here. And more holes in the walls. And you can see the arrival and departure tracks are here, a three-track classification yard, and then some staging over here. So that's the Chicago Northwestern part of it. I showed you the yard in the EJ&E yard. Let's go back. Things ran well until I went to the JMRI website and I updated the program. Now, and I think JMRI hired people from Microsoft whose job it is to bring your computer to its knees with every new release of Windows. Because they did it. So the EJ&E starts at Waukegan, comes down to the interchange yard in West Chicago. And this guy is always in the middle. Then it crosses the main lines here. JB Tower. JB Tower is probably the last operating tower in Illinois, I think. They still use it.
There are diamonds.
Pardon me?
Across the track level.
Yep. Yep.
Built track work yet for that? The diamonds?
Diamonds are built.
You got it, yeah?
They're all built, yeah. I started with the hard things, and I'm hoping that was a good idea. So the EJ&E comes along. I have a propane plant here. This is West Chicago. So this scene, I didn't bring in. I have a photo of this scene taken right here, and I have actually the tower is, there's a kit made for this tower. There's a company called, I think it's HRM Models out of Wisconsin that does all kinds of Midwest laser kits. He's got over 100 of them. And they're incredibly reasonably priced, but as the newer, more complicated stuff comes out, it's obviously more expensive. And it was interesting because the kit I bought, it was the modernized version. And the main thing that was different is the stairways changed over time to get up to the second level. And also on the very front of this brick wall, they had installed a plaque that said EJ&E. Well, in 1975, they didn't have that plaque. So I called the guy up, could you cut me a new front? Sure, you know, it was just, I got a new front for $7 or something like that, and also. So he was really good about that, but you know, that should, that's something I'm, you know, got planned. And I also got lucky and found shots of the interior of this tower for the second floor. I have no idea what is in the lower floor of a tower, other than, you know, some type of equipment.
Is it
Well,
manual?
This is a electromechanical.
So that would be usually what the lower floor is.
Yeah. I've never seen anybody model it, but I've also never seen a photo of it, so I don't know what you would do it. Anyway, so let me get done with this. So the EJ&E comes around here. It goes to the wall. Here's going to be a second power plant, and it's really, this is in the Joliet area. And they actually, the EJ&E just delivered trains through a gate, and then the power plant took care of everything else. So it's just going to be in front of a photo backdrop. This will be another power plant, Northern Indiana Public Service down in the Gary area. And then this is the steel mill and that. So that's pretty much it. Now, one of the things that I was able to do with it, first let me just show you. Let me get rid of. What components are you putting into the steel mill? Well, definitely an open hearth. I'm thinking of no, open hearth, the blast, I'm gonna create an open hearth, the blast furnace. There'll be a slab roller there. The coals will be rolled in Granite City, because obviously at the time in Gary, their hot strip mill was down, so I gotta take slabs down to Granite City and I'd have some region. The coke oven is there. That's one of the few things that's already done. One of the things I used this program for was designing the structure. And this gives you an idea of how this blob was done. And, you know, it worked great because you could figure out all the angles on here and then go and cut things very precisely to get all this curvature in that. I have a 24-foot L girder section through the peninsula. And all these green lines are joists cut out of plywood. And everything is marked on here, so when it comes time to putting it up, you know where it all goes. So when I designed this, the first thing I did was do a rough design of the layout. And then came, you know, the fact that I had to put in a drop ceiling and I had to put in lighting. Based on the ceiling obstacles and the heights of things, you know, I had pipes that were lower than the tops of the door frame, so I had to offset things in a couple of places. But basically, I designed the lighting after I had roughed into the design of the track. I could do a presentation on it just on the lighting and all that stuff. You know, I experimented and researched it and all of that. So I found troughers that online. My standard trougher is 3 tubes. It's direct wire LED, so it will never take a fluorescent tube. And the troughers, the notion I had was if it's too bright with 3 tubes, I can just take out the center tube. Direct wire doesn't care. You know, it's not like fluorescents where you take one tube out and everything dies. There's a couple places where I had to go and you can see the one at the lower right corner there called 2x2. Well, because of the sewer line running past there, I had to put in a 2-foot by 2-foot one, and those are an integrated unit with light LED strips in it. Different manufacturer. They both say 5K or 5,000 Kelvin. And when you look at them, gee, one looks a whole lot more blue than the other one, but when you look at the layout, you don't see it. So the whole ceiling design was done in here. The lighting design was done in here.
So with a 2x4 grid or a 2x2?
Pardon me?
2x4 grid or a 2x2?
2x4 grid, and there's a few places I had to put 2x2 roads in. And I thought about putting in valances, but I really needed the light to build the layout. You know, this whole peninsula room had one socket with one light bulb in it. You know, it just wasn't gonna cut it. So anyway, any questions on the extract CAD? Because I'm done with this part. I have just a little more of some photos.
What height is your, this upper level?
The upper level is 54, but as you know, because of grades, for instance, from this curve around the blob is a downgrade to Geneva, which is, no, I've lost it. Geneva over here is at 52, it flattens out, then it drops down. And in order to go under the yard, it's at 49, and then it comes back up.
So what do you, for percentage wise in your grades, do you have them?
About, I think it's 2% minutes. And same with the helix. And the trains have no problem. Okay. And the lower level is at 30. So people will be able to sit on a little stool and operate sitting down. So I know, I mean, there's people we operate with who have trouble standing alone and they can go take over something under the level. So that's the plan. Let me just show you one more thing. So right here under the stairs, I built in a desk under there. And I can have two computer terminals or displays side by side, and that's where the dispatcher will be. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to show you here. Any questions about the extra CAD design? So as I've said, it's very ambitious. And basically I started with the peninsula. So the peninsula is built, zoom out here.
Width of the walkways.
These are, well, this here is this is 26. I think this is 30. It widens out down here where there's some switching. This is wider. I mean, this again is about a 24-inch pinch point, same here, but they're a little bigger than that. So they're not as good as I would like them. Not too bad.